The sound that came from my sister's throat wasn't quite a scream. It was something between a gasp and a choke, the noise someone makes when their entire reality shatters in a single sentence. Majority shareholder? The words tumbled from her lips as her face drained of color. Around us, the champagne-sipping executives at Meridian Capital's annual gala turned to stare. Richard Chen, the CEO of the $800 million private equity firm where my sister had worked for 3 years, stood beside me with his hand extended in greeting. His smile was warm, genuine, completely oblivious to the family drama he'd just detonated. "Ms. Rodriguez, it's an honor to have you here in person," he continued. "Everyone, this is Sofia Rodriguez, the founder of Apex Ventures. She's been our largest investor for the past 18 months, holds 61% of our equity. We wouldn't exist in our current form without her capital and guidance." My sister, Isabella, stood frozen 3 feet away, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. Just 2 minutes earlier she'd been lecturing me about the embarrassment of my fake CEO title, in front of her colleagues. Now those same colleagues were watching their boss treat me with the deference reserved for the person who could end all their careers with a single phone call. Because that's exactly what I was. Not just an investor. Not just a silent partner. The majority shareholder. The woman who'd quietly poured $43 million into Meridian Capital when they were weeks from bankruptcy. The founder who'd built a venture capital empire while my family thought I was playing pretend in a rented office. "Richard," I said smoothly, taking his hand. "Thank you for the warm welcome. I've been hearing excellent things about your team's performance this quarter." Isabella's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. The invisible sister. Growing up as Isabella Rodriguez's younger sister meant living in perpetual shadow. She was the golden child, Harvard MBA, recruited by 3 top consulting firms before she even graduated, promoted twice in her first year at Meridian Capital. She was everything my parents had dreamed of. Polished, connected, successful in ways they understood. I was the weird one. The daughter who studied computer science instead of business. Who started angel investing at 24 with money I'd made from selling a small app development company. Who talked about cap tables and equity structures instead of country clubs and corporate ladders. Sofia's always been unconventional, my mother would say at dinner parties, her tone suggesting unconventional was code for unemployable. The truth was more complicated. At 26, I'd started Apex Ventures with $8 million of my own capital and a thesis that most VCs missed. Small and mid-sized PE firms were desperately undercapitalized and would pay premium returns for patient, strategic money. While everyone else chased flashy tech startups, I was quietly funding the unglamorous world of private equity. The firms that bought manufacturing companies, logistics operations, healthcare providers. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't something you could brag about at parties. But it was incredibly profitable. Within 3 years, I'd turned that $8 million into a $340 million fund. I had ownership stakes in 12 private equity firms across the country. My portfolio companies generated over $2 billion in annual revenue. I employed a team of 8 analysts and had commitments from institutional investors for a second fund that would be 3 times larger. But my family had no idea. To them, I was still Sofia who works with computers, or Sofia with her little investment thing. They'd never asked for details. Never expressed curiosity about what I actually did. And I'd learned early that trying to explain carried more risk than benefit. The turning point had come 2 years ago when Isabella called me, practically bursting with excitement. She'd just been promoted to Director of Investments at Meridian Capital. At 29, she was the youngest person to hold that title in the firm's history. "This is it, Sofia," she'd gushed. "This is what real success looks like. You should see my office, corner view, the whole 9 yards. Maybe you should think about applying for something entry-level here?" I could put in a word. I'd congratulated her warmly while mentally reviewing the confidential memo I'd received the week before. Meridian Capital was in trouble. Bad bets on retail real estate, a failed healthcare roll-up, and mounting investor redemptions had left them dangerously undercapitalized. They needed $40 to $50 million in fresh equity within 60 days or they'd be forced to liquidate their portfolio at fire sale prices. "Thanks, Izzy," I'd said. "That's really thoughtful." 3 weeks later, I'd wired $43 million to Meridian Capital in exchange for 61% of the company. The deal was structured through a series of holding companies, my name buried in legal documents that nobody read carefully. Richard Chen, the CEO, knew exactly who I was. The board knew. But the employees, including Isabella, were simply told that a strategic investor had provided rescue financing. Why didn't I tell her? Partly because the confidentiality provisions of the investment prohibited it. Partly because I was curious how long it would take for someone in my family to actually ask what I did. But mostly because I'd grown tired of being dismissed. Over the next 18 months, Isabella's career flourished. Ironically, because of my capital injection. The firm stabilized. New deals closed. Bonuses were paid. She was promoted again, this time to senior director. My parents threw her a celebration dinner. This is what dedication and hard work look like, my father had said, raising his glass to Isabella. Then turning to me with forced politeness, and Sofia, how's what do you call it? Your investment hobby? It's going well, I'd replied simply. Isabella had laughed. Sofia calls herself a CEO. Can you believe that? Like of what? A one-person office. I'd smiled and changed the subject. At that moment, the one-person office she was mocking had a portfolio worth $340 million and had just closed commitments for a second fund of over $1 billion. But I'd learned that numbers that large didn't register with people determined to see you as small. The final straw came 3 weeks ago. Isabella had called me, her voice dripping with condescension. Sofia, I need to talk to you about something. It's about your LinkedIn profile. You have CEO Apex Ventures listed, and honestly it's kind of embarrassing. People I work with can see we're related. Can you maybe change it to founder or independent investor? Pio makes it sound like you run a real company. Something in me had snapped, not into anger but into clarity. I was done hiding. Done protecting my family from the discomfort of my success. Actually, Izzy, I am a CEO. Apex Ventures is a real company. We manage over $400 million in assets under management. She'd laughed. Sofia, come on. Don't lie to make yourself feel better. We both know you're just messing around with some small investments. It's fine to have a hobby, but you don't need to inflate it. Okay, I'd said quietly. If you say so. When she'd invited me to Meridian's annual gala the following week. You should see what a real corporate event looks like. I'd accepted immediately. It was time for the truth to surface. Building in the shadows. Apex Ventures wasn't built by accident. It was built on a thesis that most people in finance thought was boring, and that's exactly why it worked. While everyone was chasing unicorn startups and cryptocurrencies, I was looking at a massive opportunity that was hiding in plain sight. Middle-market private equity firms were chronically short on capital. These weren't the giant firms like KKR or Blackstone that dominated headlines. These were the $200 to $800 million funds that bought HVAC distributors, medical device manufacturers and logistics companies. Unglamorous businesses that generated steady cash flow and real profits. The problem was that these PE firms struggled to raise money. Institutional investors wanted to write $50 million checks to brand-name firms. High-net-worth individuals didn't understand private equity. So these perfectly good firms were stuck. They had deal flow and expertise but not enough capital to execute. That's where I came in. I'd become the specialized investor who understood their world. I'd write $20 to $50 million checks in exchange for significant equity stakes, 20% to 65% of the GP, depending on the situation. Then I'd use my capital and connections to help them grow. The returns were extraordinary. While venture capital averaged 12 to 15% annual returns, my portfolio was generating 28 to 35%. I wasn't just an investor. I was often the largest shareholder with board seats and real influence over strategy. Meridian Capital had been my largest single investment, but it was far from my only one. I had major stakes in 11 other firms. One in Houston that specialized in energy services. One in Chicago focused on healthcare. One in Boston that did manufacturing roll-ups. Together, my portfolio companies had acquired over 200 businesses and generated $2.3 billion in annual revenue. I'd built a team to manage it all. My COO, Jennifer, had been a partner at a major consulting firm before I convinced her to join. My head of portfolio operations, Marcus, had been CFO of a Fortune 500 company. I had 8 investment analysts, each one covering specific sectors. We worked out of a 12,000 square foot office in a nondescript building downtown. No fancy lobbies, no impressive art collections, just smart people doing excellent work. Why don't you tell your family? Jennifer had asked me once, after we'd closed a particularly profitable exit that had returned 4.2x our invested capital. Because they think they already know who I am, I'd said. And I've learned that people who've decided you're small rarely let you become big in their minds. It's easier to just prove it than to argue about it. The irony was rich. Isabella worked in private equity but had never bothered to look up Apex Ventures. A simple Google search would have revealed our portfolio, our leadership team, our track record. But she'd been so convinced I was playing pretend that she'd never looked past her own assumptions. I lived modestly by billionaire standards, though my net worth had crossed $200 million the previous year. A nice townhouse, not a mansion. Tesla, not a Bentley. I spent my money on what mattered. Building the business, compensating my team well, and strategic investments that compounded over time. The other portfolio company CEOs knew exactly who I was. I was the person who showed up to board meetings with detailed analyses. The investor who could write a $10 million follow-on check with 48 hours notice. The strategic partner who connected them with potential acquisition targets and helped them navigate complex negotiations. But to my family, I was still just Sofia with her investment hobby. And that was about to change. The gala. The Meridian Capital annual gala was held at the Grand Ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel. Chandeliers, chamber orchestra, waiters circulating with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's car payments. It was exactly the kind of ostentatious display that Isabella loved and that I generally avoided. I'd arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple black dress and the kind of jewelry that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. Isabella spotted me immediately and rushed over, her expression somewhere between horror and pity. Sofia. It actually came. Okay, well, you're here now. Just, please don't tell people you're a CEO tonight, okay? These are serious business people. It would be really embarrassing for both of us. Understood, I'd said neutrally. She'd introduced me to a few of her colleagues with studied casualness. This is my sister Sofia. Is between opportunities right now. Does some investing. I'd smiled politely at the sympathetic expressions. One of Isabella's colleagues, a managing director, had tried to be kind. Investing is great, he'd said. We're always looking for analysts if you're interested in something more stable. I could pass your resume to HR. That's very kind, I'd replied. Isabella had steered me toward a corner, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Listen, Sofia. I need you to understand something. You can't go around calling yourself a CEO. It's not real. You're embarrassing yourself and by extension you're embarrassing me. These people, she gestured around the room, they've worked incredibly hard to get here. Real careers. Real companies. You understand. I understand, I'd said. Good. And please stop telling people you're a CEO. It's not helping anyone. You're right, I'd said simply. I'm not a real CEO. Isabella had looked relieved. Thank you. I know it's hard to hear, but I'm trying to help you face reality. That's when Richard Chen had spotted me from across the room. I watched his face light up with recognition and genuine pleasure. He'd been trying to get me to attend this event for months. I was, after all, the reason the company still existed. But I'd always declined, preferring to keep my involvement quiet. Until tonight. He'd started making his way toward us and I'd felt Isabella stiffen beside me. She was probably worried her weird little sister was about to embarrass her in front of her boss. She had no idea how right she was, though not in the way she imagined. The decision to attend the gala had been strategic, made 3 weeks earlier during a quarterly board meeting with Richard and Meridian's other directors. I'd like to attend the annual gala, I'd said after we'd wrapped up the financial review. It's time the broader team knew who their majority shareholder is. Richard had looked surprised. For 18 months, I'd insisted on anonymity. My investment had been structured through holding companies. Only the board and a handful of senior executives knew that Apex Ventures, and specifically Sofia Rodriguez, owned 61% of the company. May I ask what changed? He'd said carefully. Personal reasons, I'd replied. It's time to be visible. What I hadn't said was that those personal reasons involved my sister calling me 3 days earlier to lecture me about my LinkedIn profile. Or that I'd grown tired of watching my family celebrate mediocrity while dismissing the real thing. Richard had been thrilled. The team would love to meet you properly. You've been this mysterious figure for so long, the investor who saved us but never shows her face. It would mean a lot to have you there. There's one thing, I'd said. My sister works at Meridian. Sofia Rodriguez, one of your directors. Understanding had dawned on his face. She doesn't know. No. And I'd like to keep it that way until the gala. Let it be a surprise. He'd smiled slowly. I understand. We'll keep your attendance quiet until the night itself. The next 3 weeks had been carefully orchestrated. I'd made sure my team at Apex was prepared for the increased visibility that would come from outing myself as Meridian's majority owner. Jennifer had updated our website and prepared materials in case press inquiries followed. Marcus had briefed our other portfolio company CEOs that I'd be going public with one of our investments. Are you sure about this? Jennifer had asked. Once you're visible, you can't go back to being invisible. Every family gathering will be different. Good, I'd said. I'm done being invisible. The morning of the gala, Isabella had sent me a text. Don't forget tonight. Business casual. And please just say you're in finance if anyone asks. Don't overcomplicate it. I'd replied simply, see you tonight. Everything was in place. The stage was set. All that remained was letting the truth unfold. The reveal. Richard Chen's approach was purposeful, his expression warm and enthusiastic. Behind me, I felt Isabella stiffen with what I assumed was anxiety about her boss meeting her embarrassing sister. Ms. Rodriguez, he called out as he reached us. I didn't realize you'd arrived. This is wonderful. Isabella's face went through a rapid sequence of expressions, confusion about why her CEO was addressing me so formally, then concern that I was about to say something embarrassing, then the beginning of a polite smile as she prepared to explain away whatever awkwardness was coming. Richard, I said warmly, extending my hand. Thank you for the invitation. I thought it was time to attend in person. Time. Isabella's voice was sharp. You two know each other? Richard turned to her with genuine surprise. Isabella, you didn't tell me Sofia was your sister. This is amazing. She's been our guardian angel for the past 18 months. Guardian angel? Isabella's laugh was uncertain. Richard, I think there's some confusion. This is my sister Sofia. She does some small investing. Maybe you met at a conference or something. Richard's expression shifted from enthusiasm to careful understanding. He looked at me questioning. I gave him a small nod. Go ahead. He turned back to Isabella, his voice taking on the formal tone of a CEO making an important announcement. Isabella, I don't think you understand. Sofia isn't someone I met at a conference. She's the founder and CEO of Apex Ventures, our largest investor and majority shareholder. The color drained from Isabella's face. That's not possible. Apex Ventures is. The strategic investor is Apex, but that's me, I said quietly. I'm Apex Ventures. Richard was warming to his theme now, addressing the small crowd that had gathered around us. Everyone, I want you to meet Sofia Rodriguez properly. She's the founder of Apex Ventures, one of the most successful private equity investors in the middle market. 18 months ago, when Meridian was facing a capital crisis that could have ended the firm, Sofia stepped in with $43 million in financing. She didn't just save us. She became our strategic partner and our largest shareholder with 61% equity stake. Isabella's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. The sound of shattering crystal was deafening in the sudden silence. 61%, she whispered. Majority control, Richard confirmed. Sofia has board seats, approval rights on major decisions, and has been instrumental in our strategic direction. The turnaround you've all witnessed, the new deals, the expanded portfolio, the stabilization of the firm, that all started with her capital and guidance. One of Isabella's colleagues, the managing director who'd offered to pass my resume to HR, was staring at me with dawning horror. You're Apex? I thought. You said you were between opportunities. I didn't say that, I corrected gently. Isabella said that. I said I'd do some investing. Isabella had finally found her voice, though it came out as a strangled sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. But you work out of a small office. You said you had a small fund. I never said small, I said quietly. You assumed. I told you I ran a venture capital fund focused on private equity investments. You decided that meant I was playing pretend. Richard was still addressing the crowd, clearly enjoying this moment. Apex Ventures manages over $400 million in assets under management. Sofia has ownership stakes in 12 private equity firms across the country. Her portfolio companies generate over $2 billion in annual revenue. She's one of the most successful investors in the middle market PE space. The gathered executives were looking at me with new eyes now. The kind of deference that comes from recognizing someone with real power. Someone who could, with a single phone call, influence their careers, their bonuses, their futures. This can't be real, Isabella said, her voice rising. You're my little sister. You're supposed to be, you work with computers. You have a hobby investment thing. You're not. A real CEO? I finished for her. That's what you said 20 minutes ago, isn't it? That I'm not a real CEO. That I should stop embarrassing myself with that title. She had no response. The reality was washing over her in waves. Every dismissive comment, every condescending explanation of how real business worked, every time she talked over me or introduced me as her sister who does computer stuff. I'd love to chat more, Richard said to me, but I need to give the welcome speech. Would you join me on stage? I'd like to properly recognize your contribution to our success. Of course, I said. As I walked toward the stage with Richard, I heard Isabella behind me, her voice breaking. Sofia, wait. We need to talk. I don't understand. But I kept walking. There would be time to talk later. Right now, I had something more important to do. Stand on that stage and be visible fully and completely for the first time in my family's presence. Richard's speech was gracious and thorough. He detailed the crisis the firm had faced, the rescue financing I'd provided, and the strategic partnership we'd built. He showed slides. Company performance metrics, portfolio growth, client satisfaction scores. Every metric had improved since my investment. I want everyone here to understand, he concluded, that the jobs you have, the bonuses you've earned, the deals you've closed, all of it exists because Sofia Rodriguez believed in this firm when others didn't. She didn't just provide capital. She provided wisdom, patience, and strategic guidance. She is, in every sense, the reason we're all here tonight. The room erupted in applause. Every person in that ballroom was applauding me, including my sister who looked like she was doing so on autopilot, her face a mask of shock and confusion. When Richard invited me to say a few words, I kept it brief. Thank you all. I've enjoyed watching Meridian's transformation over the past 18 months. You have a talented team and strong leadership. I'm proud to be your partner. I paused, looking directly at Isabella. And I'm especially glad I could be here tonight to see it all firsthand. As I stepped off the stage, executives lined up to introduce themselves properly. The same managing director who'd offered to pass my resume to HR was now stammering an apology. The CFO wanted to schedule a meeting. The head of investor relations was asking about press opportunities. And through it all, I could see Isabella standing alone near the bar, watching her entire understanding of reality crumble around her. The aftermath. 20 minutes later, I found Isabella in a small alcove off the main ballroom. She was sitting on a bench, staring at nothing, her phone in her hands. Can we talk? I asked quietly. She looked up at me and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes. I'm so stupid, she said. So incredibly stupid. You're not stupid. Yes, I am. All this time. Sofia, you saved my company. You saved my job. My promotion, my bonus, everything I've been celebrating. It only exists because you wrote a $43 million check. And I've been treating you like you were a failure. Yes, I said simply. You have. She flinched at the directness but didn't argue. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? I asked. If I'd told you 18 months ago that I was about to invest $43 million in Meridian, that I ran a $400 million fund, that I owned stakes in 12 PE firms, would you have believed me? Silence. We both knew the answer. I would have thought you were lying, she admitted. Or exaggerating. I would have. God, Sofia, I would have told you to stop pretending. Exactly. So I stopped trying to make you see me. I just built something so undeniable that eventually the truth would surface on its own. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, you must hate me. I don't hate you, I said and meant it. But I'm done accepting your definition of who I am. If you want to be part of my life going forward, it has to be on terms that respect who I actually am, not who you decided I should be. I don't even know who you are, she said, her voice small. I thought I did, but I don't. You're the majority shareholder of my company. You're incredibly successful, and I've spent years treating you like a charity case. Then maybe it's time to get to know me properly, I said. The real me. Not the version you created in your head. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Saw the LinkedIn mentions. Congrats on coming out of stealth. How'd it go? I typed back. Exactly as expected. Talk tomorrow. What happens now? Isabella asked. Now. I stood up, smoothing my dress. Now I'm going to go network with Richard's other investors. I have a job to do, being a good partner to the firms I've invested in. As for us, that's up to you. You can either spend the rest of your life embarrassed that you didn't see me clearly, or you can accept that you were wrong and we can build something new from here. I choose the second one, she said quickly. I choose to build something new. Good, I said. Then let's start by you introducing me to your team properly. Not as your little sister who's between opportunities, but as Sofia Rodriguez, CEO of Apex Ventures and your firm's majority shareholder. She stood up, wiping her eyes and straightening her shoulders. I can do that. 3 months later. The relationship with Isabella didn't heal overnight. But slowly, carefully, we started building something real. A relationship based on truth rather than assumptions. She came to visit Apex Ventures headquarters on a Saturday morning when the office was quiet. I gave her the full tour. The war room where we analyzed potential investments, the conference room where we held board meetings, the workspace where my team of 8 analysts tracked portfolio performance across 12 firms and hundreds of underlying companies. This is incredible, she said quietly, standing in my office overlooking the city. You built all of this. I did. While you thought I was playing pretend. She turned to face me. I need you to know something. I've been thinking a lot about why I couldn't see you. And I realized it wasn't really about you at all. It was about me. How so? I needed you to be small so I could feel big. I'd built my entire identity on being the successful sister, the accomplished one, the one our parents were proud of. Few were successful too, more successful than me. What did that make me? It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. And now I'm learning that your success doesn't diminish mine. That we can both be accomplished without competing. That being proud of you doesn't mean I have to be ashamed of myself. That's growth, I said. Real growth. Our parents took longer to come around. When Isabella finally told them the truth, that their disappointing daughter was actually a massively successful investor who'd saved Isabella's company, they'd gone through the predictable sequence of disbelief, shock, and finally awkward pride. We had no idea, my mother kept saying at dinner the following week. You never told us. I tried, I said gently. But you'd decided who I was before you ever asked who I'd become. The story spread through the finance community quickly. The secret investor became a profile in the Wall Street Journal. How she built a $400 million fund in stealth mode ran in Forbes. Suddenly, I was getting inquiries from PE firms across the country who wanted Apex as an investor. But the success that mattered most wasn't measured in dollars or press mentions. It was measured in the rebuilt relationships with my family. Relationships now based on truth rather than assumptions. At Apex's annual investor meeting, I stood before our limited partners and shared our performance. 31% average annual returns, 12 successful portfolio companies, over $2.3 billion in portfolio revenue. Isabella was in the audience, not as my dismissive sister, but as a guest I'd invited to see what I'd built. Afterward, she approached me with something in her hand. I wanted to give you this, she said, passing me a framed photo from the gala. The moment when Richard had introduced me to the room. My face was calm, composed. Hers, visible in the background, showed pure shock. Why would I want this? I asked. Because it's the moment I finally saw you, she said simply. Really saw you. And I never want to forget what it cost us both that it took so long. I took the photo, understanding what she was really saying. I'm sorry. I see you now. I won't forget again. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my office, looking out over the city. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Fund 2 just got its final commitment. $1.2 billion. We did it. I smiled. Apex Ventures was growing, my family was healing, and I was finally fully visible. Not as someone's little sister who played at business, but as exactly who I'd always been. Sofia Rodriguez, CEO, investor and builder of empires. The woman who'd never needed their permission to be successful. Just their willingness to finally open their eyes and see.